All right, welcome everyone to the Flux Dev meeting. Today is Wednesday, the 25th November. Yeah, here's a link to the agenda document. People are still adding things. Okay. Yeah, I think we have somebody who's new. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Maybe you could quickly introduce yourself.
My name, Aurel. You can call me Relu by my GitHub handle if that's easier. I work as a cloud architect for a small company in Belgium, Swartlist, and I've just joined the community, the Flux community, a few weeks ago, and I'm really glad to be part of the contributors team now. So,
welcome. Thanks for all your contributions so far. Great to have you on board.
Right. Huge amount of help. Oh, that reminds me. I need to put something on the agenda.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just scanning the notes from last time. Are there any open action items? I think we need to highlight from last time. At least nothing I can see. All right. Yeah, the next item is UI proposal. Whose item is this? Does anyone want to?
That's me. I just wanted to bring up that Jordan has put in a proposal for developing Flux GUI. I'll put the link in the agenda doc. It's worth having a look at. It's fairly brief at present because it's really just setting out a plan for getting going. But even if you just have a look and kind of express your support, that would be a useful thing to do. I'll put a link in the agenda, as I said. If anyone's got any thoughts here, of course, you can discuss them. I just mainly just wanted to bring it to people's attention.
Cool. Any comments or questions?
I just added my comments there regarding authentication, so I think that's going to be the hardest part. There was I had a meetup 3 weeks ago where some of the maintainers from Backstage, the Spotify project, presented basically how they do like authentication towards Kubernetes for their developers. And it's kind of interesting because they have like this translation layer where they're able to authenticate with, at the moment it only works for Google Cloud, but they're able to authenticate with their Google accounts and then assume the user's permissions so that you only get what you're able to see in the cluster. Because that's kind of a big thing missing with the Argo CD GUI is it kind of breaks RBAC, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's a kind of a strong principle of Flux that should extend into the graphical user interface, I think, to just use the Kubernetes primitives and API. And that extends to the authentication and authorization, I think. There's ways of setting Kubernetes to use things like OAuth or OpenID Connect rather, which I think if the GUI is sort of installed to be usable by different teams, like as a shared thing in a cluster, then making people do a bit of extra work to have a single sign-on thing is is acceptable, I think. Stefan, you unmuted. Did you have a comment to make as well?
Yeah, I think people should log in with Kubernetes tokens in our UI and not implement a different authentication layer with, I don't know, external providers like GitHub, whatever. You can do that at Kubernetes level, and we'll just look up the token, and if, I don't know, you have the, I don't know, GitHub authentication provider installed in Kubernetes, and if that's enabled in the Kubernetes API, then all users will have a token that's valid for that, and we can bind the token to RBAC, which we are after. We don't want to.
Yep.
We want to restrict a user to its Kubernetes RBAC, not coming with a different approach.
Yep, totally, 100%. OpenID Connect works quite well for this, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the Kubernetes
GitHub
dashboard does that. You can log in with the config, I don't know, JSON or whatever it is, or just a token. And they don't use an external database or anything like that. It works fine. So I think at least for version 1, that should cover most use cases.
Yeah, version 1 will run locally anyway, so it'll have access to your token if you have one.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to
works
pick
nicely. I
or
think
we
Jordan
can
said
look it up.
Yeah, sorry. And working locally, I think, is a good idea to start off with for that reason. I think Jordan's done a good job there setting that out. Cool. We move on to the next.
Yeah, so there's a proposal that Flux 2 maintainers should get access to all GitOps Toolkit repositories. Whose item is this?
This is me. So I thought of this because Relu was contributing to the image controllers, and I had to do a bit of faffing around in GitHub to give him the ability to merge stuff, and I think it was some other thing, but anyway. And this made me think maybe because basically Flux 2 maintainers will tend to need access to quite a few repos. Maybe we could make a team for that, rather than doing each repo's maintainer's file and permissions individually.
Okay, so first we need to consolidate the maintainers from different repos on the Flux2 repo, then use the maintainers file from the Flux2 repo and keep it in sync with that particular team and give maintainer access. Yeah, I'm okay if we stick to that. I mean, every time we add someone to the maintainers file, not only invite them to the organization, but also include them in the Flux2 team, or however you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, we have to manage permissions anyway, so it sort of makes sense. This means less work, if anything. We just have to remember that that's how it works.
Yeah, maybe we should put that in writing. And
yep. Shall I do a discussion proposal thing, and then we can comment?
And I think in the end it will be a doc in the community repo that explains all that. So it's not just, I mean, after we close the discussion, create a doc so anyone can follow that. What's the procedure to add the Flux2 maintainer?
Yeah. And in a sense, it's sort of not a carve out, but it's sort of an addendum to the governance, isn't it? So we should say, this is how the Flux v2 governance bit, or these repos are done this way.
Yeah, I think we have 7 of them, so using a group will be way better.
Yeah, that was my thinking as well.
All right, any more feedback on this? Okay, looks like the next item is about image automation progress. I guess it's also you, Michael.
It's me again. Yeah, so with Relu's help, we've been making quite a bit of progress getting the image automation controllers, there's 2 of them, to the point where they are up to speed with the rest of GitOps Toolkit. And I think probably by next week, they will be, conform to all the different conventions that the other controllers use, which is great. That means we can then move on to actually integrating them in the command line. And once that's done, that is sort of constitutes an alpha release, if you like, because you can use them in exactly the same way. They're just not at the same sort of part of the release cycle maturity.
Yeah, I think before we add them to the CLI, we should create the API specs in each repo. So we bundle the manifests along with the docs right now. So every time we have a GitHub action that will check, hey, is the image update controller has a new version? Yes, it has. It opens a pull request, bumps the version, and also bumps the docs. And that will fail because we have no docs/spec, and for each custom resource definition, its own file. So yeah, we need to sort that out.
So what were the 2 bits to that? One was generating docs from the types.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other one, write the spec for the end user, like explaining things.
Okay, got it, right. Which is also documentation.
Yes.
Yes. And obviously just user docs in general. We should probably make those available at the same time. So I think once either slightly before or slightly after stuff goes into the command line tool, we should start concentrating on user documentation that takes into account that is in the command line tool.
Yeah, I mean, for now, to get it like step 0 to include in the CLI, we should create a docs/spec/v1 alpha1 / the name of the custom resource .markdown, paste there the Kubernetes structure, and that should be like the minimum requirement in terms of the file is there. But if you look at, for example, this stuff here for the customization custom resource, after all the after the Golang types, we've documented the main features, like, hey, how does reconciliation work? How do you generate a YAML? How do you deal with dependencies and so on? And we also have in here, the idea is to give people examples of YAMLs they can copy paste easily and play with them. So
there's actually 3 things there. There's generate the type information, basically as documentation, write a reference to how to use the API, and write a user guide.
Yes.
How to set it up.
Yeah, but okay. The user guide is outside of the controller repo itself. The user guide should be in the docs website, like, I don't know, like we have manage hand releases, manage image updates, and I think you did a good job in the README to showcase that. So that's like, let's say 80% done.
Yeah, it's just porting that to it being Flux commands mainly, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. All right. I think I've got issues in for generating the API docs as being part of the conformance. If I'll check that, but I'll make sure of that anyway.
Yeah, you did for sure. So yeah, so the generated API spec is in docs/API/ the kind name. And that's fully generated from source code. And then we have spec where we actually, write down nicely, hey, we have these properties and you can use them in this way to achieve a particular thing. I can imagine at least three sections in the, for example, the scanning part, like public registries. This is how simple it is. Then when you deal with authentication, well,
yeah,
there will be many options.
nice.
And we only support, I don't know, basic auth or whatever we have right now. And yeah,
it's just basic auth.
Yeah, all the cloud providers that are not implemented, so people have to generate some static authentication for, I don't know, ECR, GCR, until we get that sorted with IAM roles and everything else.
Right, exactly.
It's quite similar to what's going on right now with the Mozilla SOAPS KMS thing, where I mentioned that, hey, you have to bind an IAM role. No one figured out how to do it. Someone managed to get it working for AWS, and I updated the docs with that person example. Okay, this is the actual IAM role you have to create, and this is how you do the binding. So I'm guessing for, let's say, ECR is the same stuff. We have to tell people, hey, you need these IAM roles to read the tags from a particular image.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So that's image automation.
Yeah, I want to talk about what's happening right now with the multi-tenancy implementation. In the last Flux release, the 0.30, we have made a breaking change in the customization API regarding impersonation. You can no longer use the field service account, has been deleted. And the new field is called service account name. It uses the same name as upstream Kubernetes. That means you can no longer impersonate a service account from a different namespace to the one where the customization object is. So that's already shipped in 0.30. Yesterday, I've implemented the same thing for Helm controller. So now in a Helm release, you can say, run all the Helm commands, be it install, upgrade, test, or anything else under a particular service account, and the field is service account name, is the same field. And we haven't made a release for Helm controller with this one, but I don't know what Hide is thinking, but I would do a release with it as soon as possible, so we have the service account impersonation fully implemented in Flux 2. And then we can move with Lee and the other discussions about users and how we can make the UX better for our end users. Right now with the service account, what it means is that you have to create a namespace, you have to create a dedicated service account in that namespace, you have to give the service account full access to your namespace. Then when you create Helm releases and customization inside that namespace, you have to assign that service account. Service account name, you have to specify the name. So it's quite a lot of work. Namespace definition, service account definition, role definition, and cluster and role binding definition. So you need like 4 objects. I'm planning to make this easy with the Flux CLI. We have a create tenant command that is not used right now. I want to modify it and you could say create tenant minus service account or something like that, and it will create the service account for you and the correct bindings and everything for each namespace. Another option I'm looking at is Kyverno. I don't know if you've heard about this. This is a policy agent in CNCF, similar to OPA, but this policy agent doesn't imply you to write any Rego rules or nothing like that. It works very nicely with customized overlays. In my mind, this is the perfect match for what we are doing with Flux. And what I managed to do this morning is create a mutation webhook for Flux that once you create a namespace, it will create the service account, the role and the cluster and the role binding. Then when you create a customization, if you don't specify a service account, it will reject it. If you create a customization that wants to use a source from a different namespace, it rejects that as well. And now I'm working on injection webhook that will inject the service account name in each customization and Helm release. I got into some issues with Kyverno right now. I'm talking to them on how to get this fixed. It's probably a bug somewhere. But the idea is, in the end, I want to create a example repo, how you install Kyverno with Flux. Then you'll apply all the policies that enforces multi-tenancy, create service accounts, role bindings, everything that you need to run in with isolation. So that's the end goal.
Why rely on an extra policy agent rather than just building the isolation in?
To avoid the flags. You didn't want flags, so this is one option to do it.
Sorry, I had a coughing fit. Why can you repeat that, Stefan? Sorry.
So with having policies means that one, you can validate this offline using the Kinevo CLI and say, hey, you've created a customization that uses a source from a different namespace. You are not allowed to do that, so it will fail on the pull request itself. It also offers protection on the server side, the same stuff, and we don't need to add any kind of flags to Flux itself. Flux will have no idea it runs in multi-tenancy or single tenancy mode. You have this policy that enforces multi-tenancy on the Kubernetes API. And it's not just about Flux things. You can, with this controller, you can, for example, say, hey, when I'm creating a namespace, create these limits for the namespace, resources, like a bunch of stuff for multi-tenancy can be done through these policies. And people definitely need that because, okay, you can separate customization and Helm releases, but what about nodes? What about affinities? What about shared resources? There are so many things to multi-tenancy that we'll never sort it out with Flux, and we have no intention on doing that. So with this tool, they have like a bunch of defined policies, example policies on how you can drive a pretty good multi-tenancy setup. So I'm planning to, reuse all the things that they are doing in this project. It's a CNCF project, and I feel like it's instead of us trying to build all this stuff and create some Flux policy on our own, we can rely on what's already out there, given that it works. So.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so good things are it's orthogonal to Flux, like you said, right? It's You can do other stuff. It's not just limited to Flux stuff. And related to that, you can tweak the policy. Like maybe you want multi-tenancy, but it's actually okay for you to refer to Git repositories in another place that in a particular namespace.
Yes.
They're like universal for everyone or something like that.
Yeah, you can definitely do that.
I think we have to be a little bit careful here to not just use this as a sort of crutch to say, like everything's allowed in Flux, and if you want to have any kind of security, then you have to use policies to lock it down. I think because in general, like all else being equal, it's better to be secure by default, meaning if you just install it, then people can't take advantage of that, right? And then carefully relax that in a few circumstances where there's sort of no other way to get stuff done. So for an example of where that's arguable is with referring to Git repositories that are in another namespace, right? That seems like a not very secure, because it just means anyone can refer to any Git repo as long as they guess where it is. On the other hand, there are probably use cases where it's basically impossible to do what you want to do without at least having the ability to do that, and you don't really want to have to sort of run Flux in a special mode like Stefan mentioned earlier. So that one, at least for me, lies in a gray area where it's arguable whether it's better to have it secure by default, i.e. you would not allow that and make people work around that, or whether you allow it and make people lock it down. And I can see the policy thing would at least be a way of, if it's easy to say, run this and it will lock everything down, and then you can selectively restrict it. I think that's kind of a reasonable argument.
Yeah, what I'm doing now, I'm building policies that are locking everything down. So then it's up to you to go into that policy and say, hey, I want to make this special use case for my shared namespace, and only from there you can reference sources or something like that. But the policy is like a network policy, that the deny all policy that doesn't come by default with Kubernetes, that doesn't come by default with Istio, AppMesh, or anything else. No one in our space is doing lockdown first. Istio was doing it, they reverted because people couldn't use it. They moved to other things. So I think we should be really careful about, locking down everything. People will not be able to use it. I think, I don't know, who needs multi-tenancy? Big corporations. If you are like a small startup or a small business with just 1 or 2 teams, you'll not be needing multi-tenancy. And then you'll be fighting Flux on how can I make this work, remove policies and so on. So
yeah, but I think it's to address that, I think it's reasonable to make it a mandatory choice. So when people install it, you say, you have to pick a policy. Here is the policy to pick if you don't care about security, if it's just basically single tenant. And here is the policy to pick if you want everything locked down. So that way there's no default. So there's no argument about like, let's make it completely locked down by default, and then people will have lots of trouble because sort of without knowing they're doing so, they get this really locked down thing that they then can't use, right? So at least if you are required to make a choice up front, then you're picking something, right? You're picking the completely locked down one, or you're consciously making a choice.
Yeah, of course. And so what I'm experimenting right now is when you opt in for, let's say, I don't know, maybe you have 2 flags or 1 flag with 2 values, multi-tenancy on, off, enable, disable, or something like that. And if you run Flux install without specifying that flag, the CLI will tell you, hey, you have to choose a value. That flag is required. You have to choose on
one
or
or the
off,
other.
or enable or disable, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But when you choose multi-tenancy on, then my idea right now is to include Kinevo in our deployment along with our policies and apply that instead of us locking down each controller with flags, implementing our own policies across all controllers. I'm trying to, make use of a project that offers all these capabilities, and it will be easier for us because we don't have to implement all of that. But it's a long shot. I'm just playing with it for a couple of hours now. I'm excited because it looks good, but you never know what.
That's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe something breaks like really, really hard, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm.
How about always including it, and then all that changes is that you have more or less policy. Like, it always gets installed, but if you choose the sort of not locked down version, it gets installed, but with very, very little in the way of policy, like possibly none.
Well, it's a controller with 3 webhooks. I don't know how expensive this is for the Kubernetes API, but there is at least 3 requests per second, more than what Flux does normally. At least 3 requests per second.
Yeah. Okay.
It also adds, I don't know if it has the same downsides as like Opa Gatekeeper does, where if Gatekeeper fails, you can basically end up in a locked state where, because the admission webhook is not responding, the API server will basically go, yeah, I'm not applying anything. And then you have to kind of recover from that locked state.
Well, yeah, which is what you want.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you want, but it also adds this situation where, okay, you basically can't do anything. I don't know if that's what everybody wants.
It's another thing that can go wrong. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And then users like me, we run Opa Gatekeeper already. It's kind of, we're now running 2 admission controllers in a cluster. So which is also, adds a bit of overhead.
So OPA is a stateful set, does a lot of caching on its own and stuff like that. Kinevo is way lighter because it's basically it applies customized overlays for mutation and generation, and then it uses JSON path for validation. So my understanding of it is that it's completely stateless. But if you scale it down to 0, everything is gone. You'll not be able to do anything on your cluster, of course. So if it needs more resources and for some reason your cluster doesn't have a resource and you are not very careful with your webhooks to set like priority 0, like it's like core DNS, right? It becomes like a major part of your cluster, like one of the, I don't know, most important add-ons. So if you are not careful with that, yes, even if you don't need multi-tenancy, if we install it for you and that crashes, it's gone. So yeah, I'm not for installing it by default.
But I think an important thing, if we don't do these things, and it kind of goes on with Michael's point, is we need to make it abundantly clear that things are not secure by default, like the whole referencing Git repositories across namespaces, because it from an outside user just talking to people, they think that, okay, I have a customization, I'm attaching a service account to it, and they assume that the service account dictates all the permissions, but it doesn't, because you can kind of, the whole customization controller is using a different set of permissions when it references Git repositories. So now I end up
change that. As I said on that discussion, I'm for changing it. If we add the multi-tenancy flag, if we go on that way, of course we can use the service account to query the source object. And if the source object is in a namespace that your service account doesn't have access to, it will not be able to query it. So it will fail.
Yeah.
That's not complicated thing to do. Like we managed to do impersonation for everything else. Like querying an object is
No,
is very.
I'm not saying it's difficult. I'm just saying that it's if we make these kind of changes where we're kind of doing something else compared to what everything else is doing, we just need to make it abundantly clear that
For me, the problem with sharing sources is not important for multi-tenancy because you can easily block that. The problem is with the service account because anyone can set whatever service account they want in there. They can remove the actual service account. And since Flux doesn't come with a validation webhook, they'll remove the service account, then they'll end up on running under cluster role, right? So you need something to say, hey, you have to have a service account. There is no other way around it because, well, you're not running in a system namespace, so you have to use a service account.
So I think that's one where it actually is worth having a flag to say, put the flag that says, instead of just defaulting to using a cluster admin, default to requiring a user or names or service account in the namespace.
Yeah, but also with the webhook that's solved, and with the webhook you have many options. Like even if you specify a namespace for your source reference, for example, how I wrote the policy is you can specify a namespace, but it has to be the same namespace as the customization of the hand release. So you don't actually have to delete the namespace. You can leave it in there. Also, with the service account, you don't have to specify a service account because I created a mutation webhook that sets the service account automatically if it's not in the Flux system namespace. So I already managed to build all of that with 3 YAMLs for Kinervo. Maybe we should create examples how we can do that with OPA and so on, and then decide, hey, do we want to add flags to all the Flux controllers so they can also enforce this, or we are happy with using just admission controllers that achieve the same stuff? And I think the community should answer. Maybe they'll say, hey, our Kubernetes distribution does not allow webhook injection. I don't know. Webhooks are complicated because they have to be signed by Kubernetes CA. There is a whole dance, so maybe we'll have that situation, and we definitely then we'll have to implement that special flag in our controllers.
And I have no issue using gatekeeper because that's what I'm kind of doing now, is writing gatekeeper constraints to enforce basically our way of working, where we have Git repository resources in the Flux system namespace, and that have the same name as the namespace for each team, where we basically then say, okay, from the namespace, you can only reference the Git repository with the same name as the namespace you're referencing from. And those kind of things are really nice because it's like, I don't think everybody wants that type of behavior, but that's exactly what we want. And the problem is that I see is that I have no problem doing this, but I expect other people to kind of look at this and go, okay, this is now difficult. Now I have to learn this whole separate project just to make Flux secure. So it's kind of, a debate back and forth.
Yeah, like Michael said, I mean, when people will say, I want to use this for multi-tenancy, we should apply some policy or some flag that locks everything up. And then it's up to you, dig into documentation, how you can relax some things. But if we have a flag in our controllers, there is no way to relax it. There is no way to do stuff like what you did with OPA. It's impossible because for a Flux controller means only this namespace or all namespaces. You are not going to add flags for, allow source refs with names that equals the namespace. Like, we'll never do that. I mean, it's not something that should live in Flux, right? That's custom policy made for your setup. What I'm trying to achieve here is have a way for people to do all sorts of things with their own policies if they want to. Like, we should allow them to say, hey, install Flux for everything free for all, then you can lock it down, and this is how you can lock it down. Or You give it this flag and that's it. There is no way around it, right?
Yeah, in that case, I think it's.
Sorry, I was just going to say, let's move on so that we make sure Daniel's got time to talk about the comms plan.
Yeah, it's really just a heads up. So we started a small team in the process around communications because we realized that we have just so many, there's just so much ongoing work, so many different repositories that we want to make it easy for you guys to basically just say, this is newsworthy, get it out there. And then we have some team that sort of handles, like, we have a Twitter account now, we have a LinkedIn group, we have a multitude of Slacks. We're working on a blog on the website. We have the mailing list. Basically, the way it works, if you go to the community repository on the Flux CD, there's a community document, and at the bottom there is so we basically have a spreadsheet. So if you have anything you would like us to get the word out, just add it there. Bookmark the thing, request access. I'll give you editing permissions, and then you can just add things that you would like us to get the word out about. And it's also going to help us, because for me, I've been doing these monthly updates on the Weave blog up until now, and for me, it's just very hard to try to understand all the individual change logs. So if you just add small things there, it's much easier. That's all.
Yeah, I'm proposing we changed our changelog format. So what we are doing right now, in the title of each release, we add the version number and the date. And because we add the date there, it makes it impossible to automate a Flux to changelog. We should remove the date from there, add it under the title. And what we can do with GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions can parse all the Go mode file. It knows what controller version is included in that release. It can go to each controller changelog file. We can take that particular changelog from each controller and assemble it in the Flux to release nodes as a single changelog. Hey, for customized controller, this is what it changed. For Helm controller, for whatever, right? We cannot do that because we use a standard where we have the date there. So through automation, you cannot just link to it or pull the text from there. I think that's definitely something that we should look into. We don't want to end up like Customize, where you look at the changelog and you don't understand anything. And you have to chase commits all over the place. So
Which is especially bad in the case of Customize because they're constantly breaking things.
We also do breaking changes, and they are documented in each changelog, but we don't promote those, all of those under Flux 2, and I think we should definitely do that. That doesn't mean we have to blog post or communicate all the changes. It's more about being transparent on the Flux 2 repo, and so people don't have to navigate everywhere.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's something that's a automation change, isn't it? It's like, that could happen in a bunch of PRs. Yeah. Okay, got it.
So first we need to change the changelog format, the title everywhere in all projects, and add the date under the title. Then we modify the GitHub action that creates the Flux 2 release text to go do a curl for the changelog, extract the particular version which matches Go mode, take that text and put it inside this unified changelog for Flux 2. It's a bunch of, grep and curl, grep, whatever. But I think it can be fully automated once we have predictable titles that match the actual version in Go mode. So
yeah, how are the individual ones done? Could the central one just replicate what the individual changelog?
So the individual changelog is written by us by hand.
Oh, it's written by hand, yeah.
Like with Flux One, we create a nice resume and then we link to some pull requests and so on. But we don't want to do that also for Flux 2. We spend all this time on each controller, so we should just use that text we wrote there and present it as a whole.
Okay.
I have a question about Twitter, the Twitter account. Where is the authentication for that?
It's in Keybase.
It's in Keybase. Do we need to authenticate in Twitter, or can you add our accounts in Twitter so we can just switch between the two? So I don't have to log in every time.
I'm not a pro there. I was just looking at it myself because Scott set it up yesterday or reclaimed it yesterday. So I'm looking at it right now.
Because I know there is a way for you to say, hey, this account.
You can do that with TweetDeck.
What?
TweetDeck.twitter.com. You can create teams there.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right. Any more questions or things you were hoping to discuss today?
I was going to ask. It doesn't really need to go on the agenda. I'm just curious. How does what Lee's investigating relate to the multi-tenancy discussion that is in GitHub? Is it like a direct follow-on, or is it sort of a parallel effort that needs to be merged? Or
so the impersonation in kubectl is broken when you run in cluster.
Yeah.
And he worked to get this patch upstream, and I'm guessing it will be in 1.20 or something like that. After we get that merged, then we'll be able to use kubectl as the directive. Right now, what we are doing in both controllers, we are querying the service account. We get a token from the service account secret and use that token to, do all the operations. And kubectl can do it on its own. The problem with our approach is we can not impersonate the user. We can only impersonate the service account because for a user, there is no secret, there is no TLS, there is no nothing, right? So that's what is blocking us from offering an alternative way of doing impersonation through users. Once we have the kubectl patch in there, then we can do kubectl apply this as this user. But Helm doesn't use this kubectl, they wrote their own stuff. So then we have to contribute impersonation to Helm itself. So also Helm can do Helm as user. And only afterwards we can fully implement it everywhere, the user impersonation. That's why I went ahead and added service account impersonation to Helm controller, because it doesn't make sense for me to wait so long for the user stuff when we have a solution for service accounts that should work across the board. So
yeah, okay, cool. And Lee mentioned that he was working on a security model in general in the Flux contributors thing. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I think he wants to document the whole stuff. I tried to do that on that discussion. I don't know what he wants to do more than that, or I don't know, create examples or whatever. But yeah, for the service account impersonation, I think after we release it, I think we should create a multi-tenancy example repo because people right now are kind of stuck. They search for multi-tenancy and they find the Flux One thing. We don't have anything for version 2, and I think we should definitely create that as soon as we have the service account in there. Because people that are using Flux One in multi-tenancy mode, even if they are using it in read-only mode, there is no upgrade path for them, and we should definitely create one.
Yep. Okay, well, hopefully he'll be in the meeting next week, so we can ask there if we don't learn before then. Cool.
Yeah. I want to ask Philip, what's the status with the Go bindings?
Oh yeah, I've been kind of taking a break for 3 days now, but I thought he had commented something about what's it called, running the tests in Docker. So the issue today is that we need to run the tests for both what's it called, Git to go and go Git in the GitHub Actions pipeline, and that runs in Ubuntu, and Ubuntu does not have a package that's new enough for libgit 2, because you need to install that. So it's kind of either we build our own package, which is kind of not fun, or we run it in Docker in Alpine. So I guess the way forward there is looking at how we run the tests, and we just have to build the Docker image and then run the tests inside of a Docker image instead, I guess.
So we can create a Docker file .build.test or something like that, .ca maybe. And in there we'll use the Alpine Go base image.
Mm-hmm.
In that base image, we'll install lib2git and libssh2. So lib2git depends on libssh2 to get thread safety. Without it, is not very safe. So we have to make sure that in the final container we have both packages. So we'll install those, then we'll run make test, make vet, and check if Git is dirty inside the container.
Yeah.
And then go through everything else. Because if we only move make test inside the container, we'll not detect changes in Go mode and so on, and we cannot break the CI. So we have to do both checks, run the test, then check, hey, the repo that I've mounted inside the container, is it dirty? Yeah, that means someone didn't run the code generation or vet or any other things.
With respect to Go mod, you can tell Go build to treat it as read only and break if it has to alter it. I've done that.
Yeah, but we cannot do Go build it crashes. Not even Go vet, because Go vet will look at the bindings. The OS has all bindings Ubuntu, so it will just crash. We need to run all these commands in Alpine, and there is no Alpine runner for GitHub Actions. It's only Ubuntu or Windows or macOS.
Sure, I don't think that. Yes. Yeah. You can also tell it to treat Go mod as read only, and it'll refuse to run unless it all works with the Go mod you've got. It's worth doing, I think, as an extra safety net. It's past 11. Jürgen, did you expect the meeting to be starting at just now?
Hi everyone. I just joined. I'm a contributor of the Captain project, and I believe maybe Stefan. I think we already met KubeCon San Diego, maybe, and we are also we are interested in maybe integrating with Flux. So and also I've seen a couple of announcements on Flux and the like a new version, and I was yeah, interested in what's going on in your community, and I thought maybe I'd just join.
Oh, cool. There was a mix-up with the time zones in the CNCF calendar, so this meeting actually starts at 10 a.m. UTC.
Okay, so I'm 1 hour late.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're just closing in.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one runs at this time every 2 weeks, and there is a US time zone friendly one, which runs the other weeks. So have a look. There is a particular procedure for getting the right times in your calendar that I can't quite remember how it works, but someone will be able to tell you.
Okay, so
you're also very welcome to join the. We've got a couple of channels in CNCF Slack as well, and there's the discussions in the Git repo, the GitHub repo.
Okay, got it.
Lots of ways of getting in touch with us if you don't want to have to wait a week or two.
I will definitely take a look and I will reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in a week or two.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Cheerio.